He spent 11 days eating out of trash cans, sleeping behind a dirty laundromat, and letting stray dogs tear at his ankles in a back alley. He looked filthy, helpless, and completely pathetic, and every single second of it was a calculated lie. His real name was Frank Russo, the sole, ruthless heir to the most powerful criminal empire in South Florida. He didn't need saving. He didn't need pity. But he had spent weeks mapping my schedule, studying my vulnerabilities, and figuring out exactly what kind of wounded creature I couldn't resist bringing home. He engineered the perfect trap, walked right into my life as a helpless stray, and let me think I was the one in control. I took him in. I cleaned him up. I demanded his absolute obedience, completely blind to the fact that the man sleeping in my bed was a monster who already owned half the city. My parents thought they could sell me off to pay their debts. They had no idea I'd already brought a predator straight into their house, one who was willing to die 3 times over just to keep me. Quick favor before the full story. Hit subscribe to help out a stranger on the internet. I promise this story is worth your time. Now back to Ella and Frank.
The first time Ella Lynn ever laid eyes on Frank Russo, he was losing a fight to 3 stray dogs in a back alley off Grand Avenue in Coconut Grove. He swung at them with a stick and stumbled, but the biggest one lunged at his ankle while the other 2 circled. Ella watched from her second-floor balcony with a bag of plantain chips in her hand, legs crossed, head tilted, genuinely entertained. After a while, she sighed, walked downstairs, and tossed the entire bag at his feet. The dogs went for the food. Frank grabbed a handful off the ground and shoved them into his mouth before the strays could get to them. Ella crouched down in front of him, close enough that he could smell her perfume over the garbage, and said, "Does trash usually taste that good to you?" He looked up at her, sweat running down his temples, dirt smeared across his jaw. She held his gaze and didn't blink. "I've been watching you," she said. "Few days now. You're not very good at surviving, are you?" She tilted her head. "Do you want to come with me? You'll never go hungry." He swallowed. "Yes." She patted the top of his head and smiled. Soft, unguarded, gone within seconds. "One condition, you stay obedient always. Say it back to me. I will always be obedient." "Good." She stood, brushed off her knees, and started walking away. She stopped, turned around. The afternoon light caught the edge of her jaw. "What are you waiting for?" He got up and followed. "Before we go any further, you need to understand who Ella Lynn actually was. Because the girl crouching on a Miami sidewalk feeding a stranger wasn't the version of herself her parents showed the world. Ella was the only daughter of the Lynn family. Old money, import empire. Her parents kept a penthouse in Brickell, a house in Coral Gables, and a social calendar that never stopped. From the outside, Ella had everything. From the inside, she was inventory. Her parents controlled what she ate, how she exercised, what she wore, where she went, and who she spoke to. They didn't raise a daughter. They maintained an asset. She was taken to galas and fundraisers, squeezed into dresses cut too small so the bones at her collarbone caught the light, and paraded in front of every eligible family on the circuit. When she got her acceptance letter to art school and told them she wanted to go, her father didn't yell. He just said no. She was going to marry Luke Anderson instead. When she refused, when she actually stood her ground and said she wouldn't do it, they killed her dog, a little thing named Coco, the only living creature in that house that loved her without conditions. They killed Coco and served her to Ella at dinner. Her mother had set the plate down and told her to eat. That broke something in Ella that never fully healed, and it turned her into someone who couldn't pass a wounded thing without stopping, couldn't see anything small and suffering without reaching for it. Which is why she was here, crouching in front of this scraggly stranger on a back street in Coconut Grove. She took him home, cleaned him up, drove him to the shops on Miracle Mile, and told him to pick whatever he wanted. In the dressing room, Frank called out that he didn't know how to button his shirt. Ella stood outside the curtain and closed her eyes. The lamest excuse she had ever heard. She pulled the curtain back, stepped in, buttoned a single button, and told him she'd show him once. Just once. As she stepped back, her shoulder blade almost hit the rack of hangers behind her, and Frank reached out, pulled her forward by the waist to stop her from stumbling. Her body went rigid. She broke free, turned to face him, and her voice dropped low. "Next time something's about to happen, just say it, don't grab me." He widened his eyes, tilted his chin down, full puppy dog mode. "Can you at least finish the buttons?" She stared at him, then buttoned every single one without a word and walked out. When he stepped out of the dressing room fully dressed, Ella scanned him head to toe. Something flickered behind her eyes, quick, barely visible, then vanished. "We'll take this one," she told the sales associate. "Wrap the rest, deliver everything." Frank tried to follow her to the car. said his place was too dirty to go back to. She shut that down fast, and then reached into her bag and pulled out a small plush puppy. It was handmade, a miniature version of Coco. She held it out to him and her voice changed, softer, almost fragile. "This is the most important thing I own, take care of it." Then she left. Frank tried to follow, but her driver stepped out of the car and blocked the path. "She'll find you when she wants to see you. Go home." Frank watched the car disappear down the avenue. He looked down at the plush puppy in his hand. 3 small black buttons were stitched across its chest. He ran his thumb across them and exhaled. "Now, this is where we actually meet Frank Russo." He was never poor. He was never homeless. He was the surviving heir of the Russo family, one of the most powerful Italian-American families in South Florida. His father, Richard Russo, ran an empire that stretched from real estate to politics to things that never made it into the newspapers. Frank had a perfect older brother, Ryan. Ryan was the one Richard groomed. Ryan was the one the family adored. Mathematics, strategy, negotiation, things that took Frank entire nights to wrestle through, Ryan handled effortlessly. Frank accepted early on that he was the lesser son. Then 3 years ago, Ryan died in a car accident. The car was meant for Frank. Ryan pushed him out of the way and took the impact. And after the funeral, instead of grief, Richard Russo looked at his remaining son and asked a question Frank still heard every time the house went quiet. "Why wasn't it you?" No matter how hard Frank worked, no matter how many deals he closed or problems he solved, his father never looked at him and saw Frank. He only saw the outline of the son who should have been standing there instead. And slowly, quietly, Frank started asking himself the same question his father asked. That was the state of him the night he first saw Ella. It was a charity gala on Star Island. One of those events where the air smelled like salt water and champagne, and everyone smiled with their teeth. Ella was there with her parents, dressed to the nines, hair pinned up, every inch of her polished and displayed. But Frank noticed something the cameras missed. She wasn't smiling when no one was watching. Between introductions, her face went blank. Just vacant. She slipped away from her parents midway through the evening and walked to an empty table in the corner and sat down alone. Frank was standing near the bar. He hadn't moved nor spoken to anyone in 20 minutes. He was watching her. A bird passed overhead and its shadow swept across Ella's hand, where it rested on the table. She stood up immediately and followed it. She walked right past Frank on her way to the balcony without seeing him. When she reached the far end of the balcony, she found a row of ornamental bird cages, decorative, filled with live birds for the aesthetic. Ella didn't pause. She started unlatching them, one by one. A security guard moved toward her, but Frank stepped forward, placed his hand flat on the man's chest and shook his head. The guard stopped. Ella glanced over her shoulder, registered that someone was watching, and turned back to the cages. She opened every single one. The birds scattered into the dark above the bay, and she stood there watching them go, her chest rising and falling, her fingers still gripping the wire of the last cage. Frank watched her from the shadows, recognition locked into place behind his ribs. She was desperate, exhausted, caged in the same way those birds had been, and she was the first thing in years that made him feel anything at all. When she turned and walked back inside, he slipped away before she reached him. That night, Frank went home and started researching everything about Ella Lynn. Her family, her habits, her psychology. He studied the kind of person she responded to, and noticed she wasn't attracted to wealth or power, but to vulnerable people she could help. So he built the disguise, picked a neighborhood near her house, started picking up trash, sleeping rough, wandering her block until she noticed. On the night her parents killed Coco, Frank stood outside the Lynn estate in the rain with an umbrella, watching her bury the dog in the garden through the fence. He didn't approach. He knew that if he'd walked up to her as Frank Russo, heir to a criminal empire, offering help, she would have shut him out permanently. So he waited, and he let her come to him. That night, on the day she took Frank in, she had a nightmare. When she woke up drenched in sweat, the loneliness hit so hard she couldn't sit still. She was pacing her room, arms wrapped around herself, jaw clenched, when she heard a knock at the front door. She opened it. Frank was standing there, rain still drying on his jacket. She didn't say a word. She walked straight into him, pressed her face into his chest and held on. Then she caught herself, stepped back, wiped her eyes fast, and asked him what he was doing here. He just smiled. They sat together on the steps out back. The air was heavy and warm, the way Miami gets after a storm. Frank reached behind him and pulled out a glass jar filled with fireflies he'd caught along the waterfront. The glow pulsed against his fingers as he held it out to her. Ella stared at it. ran her thumb along the glass and turned away to wipe the tears welling up in her eyes. "Do you think," she started, then stopped. "Do you think my life is a lot like theirs?" "What do you mean?" She unscrewed the lid, tipped the jar. The fireflies drifted out one by one, blinking into the wet dark until every last one was gone. "Now they're free," she said. Frank leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "And you? Do you also wish to be free?" Ella straightened, her face rearranged itself, the walls going back up, the posture stiffening, the practiced version of herself sliding into place. "I'm fine. I come from a good family. My parents love me. I have everything I need." She took a deep breath and turned to look at him. "Does freedom really matter when you already have all of that?" Frank's hand drifted toward her face. He stopped himself an inch away. "Do you want to live freely just like them?" he asked. "The fireflies." She looked at him, and for a second the mask cracked. Her lower lip pulled in, her eyes went glassy. Then she blinked it away, sat up straight, and said, "I've never thought about it." She stood. "But right now, Frank, I'd like to give it a try." He took her to his place. She walked through it slowly, touching nothing, observing everything. He led her to the garden, and she sat down and looked at her feet and told him they were dirty. Told him to wipe them. He went inside without a word, came back with a basin and a towel. Before he touched her, he dipped his fingers into the water and tested the temperature, then set the basin down and carefully lifted her foot into it. She watched him. Her breathing had changed, slower, deeper. The muscles in her shoulders loosened by degrees. "Why are you so good to me?" she asked. He didn't look up. He kept his hands moving, slow, deliberate. "Because it's you." He dried her feet, folded the towel, set the basin aside. "I'll always listen to you," he said. Inside, Ella sat on the edge of his bed and announced she was sleeping there. Frank nodded. She patted the mattress beside her. He didn't move. She looked up at him, her eyes flat and serious. "I don't want to say it again. Lie down." He sat beside her then. Slowly they both lay back. The ceiling fan turned above them. The room smelled faintly of salt air and laundry detergent. Ella closed her eyes and let the silence stretch until it became comfortable. "Frank." "Yeah. What do you think kissing feels like?" "I have no idea." She opened her eyes, looked at his mouth. Then she leaned across and pressed her lips to his. When she pulled back, she kept her face close and said, "Next time I ask you a question, don't answer with words." His hand came to the back of her neck and he kissed her. Slower this time. Her fingers moved to his collar, then down to the buttons of his shirt. He caught her wrist gently and stopped her. "Have you really thought about this? Are you saying no?" He laced his fingers through hers and brought her hand to his chest. "I think you should save that for someone you actually love, because that's the only way it'll mean something." She pulled her hand free, shifted the strap of her dress to the side and tilted her neck toward him. "Leave a mark, and I don't want to hear you refuse." He hesitated. His jaw tightened. Then he leaned in and pressed his mouth to the curve of her neck and left a bruise. She kissed him again. They stayed that way for a while, tangled up in each other, trading slow kisses in the half-dark. Then Ella pulled back, rolled onto her side, and stared at the wall. "I've always wanted to know," she said quietly, "what it actually feels like, being with someone, being in love." "If you want it," he said, "I'll give it to you." She closed her eyes. He watched her breathing settle, and eventually, they slept. Before Frank woke up, Ella was already gone. He found breakfast on the counter and a note in her handwriting. "Make sure you eat." Meanwhile, Ella walked through the front door of the Lynn house and straight into an ambush. Her father was in the armchair with a cigarette. Her mother was standing beside the mantel, arms folded, vibrating with fury. The second Ella stepped into range, her mother's hand landed across her face. "Where were you? You were out all night. How shameless can you be?" Ella didn't flinch. She looked at her mother, then at her father, then at the family portrait on the wall, the three of them posed and smiling in matching white. "You think that's shameless," Ella said. She reached up and pulled her dress off her shoulder, showing the bruise on her neck. "Let me show you something worse." Her mother's face drained. "What have you done?" "It's obvious, isn't it, Mom?" "Ella." Her mother's voice dropped. Not softer, just colder. "I am so disappointed in you. You know what we're dealing with right now. The business is, we are barely keeping the lights on. The bank calls your father every single day. We are looking for someone, anyone, to invest, and you are supposed to be getting married. If this continues, this family has nothing. Do you understand me? Nothing." Her father crushed the cigarette, stood up, walked toward Ella until there was barely a foot between them. "The Andersons," he said. "They are the only family willing to step in. Luke Anderson is the reason we still have a roof over our heads." He tilted his head. "So tell me, what is so difficult about marrying him?" Ella's voice was steady, but her fingers were trembling at her sides. Everything you've done to me. The diets, the dresses, the training, all of it. It was just to sell me off? Her father's expression didn't change. I raised you for the first half of your life. Now you spend the second half paying for it. That's what it means to be a daughter. Then he pulled out a bunch of photographs. Pictures of Ella and Frank, taken from a distance, walking together, sitting on the steps, her head on his shoulder. Surveillance photos. Ella stared at the pictures, her voice dropped. You were investigating me? Her father gripped her shoulders. It doesn't matter what you do. I will handle it. The engagement will be announced. Be obedient. Ella saw it clearly then. There was no version of resistance her parents hadn't already planned for. So she stopped fighting, told them fine. She'd marry Luke. Her father smiled then. As punishment for sneaking out, he sent her to the attic. No food, no water. Until she got her head straight. He picked up the phone, dialed the Anderson family, and confirmed the wedding was on schedule. What he didn't notice was Ella, standing just around the corner of the hallway, listening to every word before she walked upstairs without a sound. In the attic, she stood in front of the mirror. Her fingers drifted to her neck, tracing the spot where the bruise was already fading. She sat down at the vanity, put her head in her arms, and went still. Outside the Lynn estate, Frank stood on the sidewalk staring up at her window. His hands were in his pockets. His jaw worked back and forth. If I told her the truth now, she'd think the kiss was part of the act. She'd think all of it was the act. He was still standing there when he spotted Maya coming down the block, phone pressed to her ear, walking fast. Maya was Ella's best friend, the one person who actually knew what went on inside that house. Frank intercepted her, grabbed her hand, and pulled her aside. I'm a friend of Ella's. She's not picking up. I need to get a message to her. Maya's whole face lit up. Oh my God. You're the little boyfriend she picked up. Frank blinked. She told me about you, Maya said, grinning. Then the grin faded. If she's not answering, her parents probably locked her in the attic again. Frank processed that: the charity galas, the family portraits, the smiling faces in the society pages. All of it was theater. Behind closed doors, they locked their daughter in an attic and starved her. Maya waved her hand in front of his face. Hey, you're zoning out. What if we just got her out? Maya stared at him. Are you insane? That house has rotating security, guards at every... You go to the front gate, Frank said. Make a scene. Pull every guard's attention to the entrance. I'll go over the back wall and get to her window. Maya positioned herself at the gate and started screaming. That they were holding her friend hostage. That she'd call every news outlet in Miami. That she'd live stream the whole thing if they didn't bring Ella out right now. Every guard on the property turned toward the front. Frank went over the back wall. The stone tore his palm open when he jumped down, blood running down his wrist. But he didn't slow down. He sprinted across the yard and stopped beneath Ella's window, called her name. She pulled back the curtain and looked down at him, eyes wide. Jump, he said. I'll catch you. She tried the window. She grabbed something heavy, a bookend, a vase. He couldn't tell, and started smashing the glass. The noise carried through the house. Footsteps thundered up the stairs. Her parents and 2 guards hit the attic door just as the window gave way. Ella climbed onto the ledge. Without hesitating, she jumped. Frank caught her. The impact sent them both to the ground. He pulled her up and they ran, through the garden, past the pool house, around the side of the property where Maya had a motorbike idling at the curb. They jumped on. Maya hit the throttle, and they tore through the streets of Coral Gables, with Ella's parents screaming behind them, weaving between cars and blowing through a yellow light. They rode for 15 minutes before Maya pulled up along the seawall near the marina and killed the engine. Frank climbed off first, then Ella. Maya stayed on the bike, helmet still on, visor flipped up, looking extremely pleased with herself. Okay, she said. I just committed about 4 crimes for you. Enjoy your evening. She pointed at Frank. If she calls me crying, I'm coming for you. She flipped the visor down, kicked the bike back to life. As she rode away, Maya glanced over her shoulder, grinned, and screamed at them. You're welcome, and disappeared down the causeway. Ella watched her go, still catching her breath. Her chest was heaving. Her eyes were bright. She looked more alive than Frank had ever seen her, flushed, wired, her hands still shaking from the adrenaline, but her mouth pulling into a grin she couldn't control. They ended up on a low wall by the water. The marina stretched out behind them, boats rocking gently, halyards clinking against masts, the downtown skyline glowing across the beach. Ella sat with her legs swinging. Frank sat beside her and held out a cigarette. She took it, turned it between her fingers, and didn't light it. Maya told me about your situation at home, Frank said. If you ever want out, for real, I'll take you wherever you want to go. Ella looked at him. The glow from the streetlights caught the edge of her jaw, and the faint yellow of the bruise still visible on her neck. There's nowhere in the world I particularly want to be, she said. But when I'm with you, I don't know, I'm just not miserable. She turned the cigarette over again. I don't know if that's what it feels like to love someone, but can we try? She looked at him directly. Give me 3 days, Frank agreed. And from that moment he brought out his phone and set a timer for 72 hours. They packed everything into those 3 days. First, a vinyl cafe in Wynwood, the kind of place with dim lighting and worn leather chairs and walls, lined with records from decades nobody in there was alive for. They shared a single earpiece. Ella read, Frank didn't. He watched her instead, the way her fingers held the edge of the page, the way her brow creased when she concentrated. She caught him, made him perform as punishment. He picked up a guitar hanging on the wall and played her something on the spot. She didn't clap when he finished. She just looked at him with her chin in her hand, her mouth slightly open, and said nothing. Then, a claw machine in an arcade on the beach. Frank had clearly never touched one in his life, but his pride wouldn't let him say so. He jammed quarters in and missed 5 times in a row. Ella watched with her arms crossed and her eyebrows raised. Then she stepped up, worked the joystick once, and pulled out a white plush puppy on her first try. She turned and kissed him on the cheek. And immediately, almost instinctively, his lips found hers, but only for a few seconds. She pulled back and frowned. Why are you such a bad kisser? He pushed his glasses up. I don't have a lot of experience, obviously. She tucked the bear under her arm. I won't tell you where I got mine. They ate at a Cuban spot in Little Havana, one of those restaurants with plastic tablecloths and ceiling fans. The owner recognized Frank, came out and told Ella he was the hardest working young man she'd ever seen. Frank taught Ella how to eat rapa vieja. She hadn't been allowed carbs in so long that the first bite made her eyes close. Frank dared her to eat the way she actually wanted to. He demonstrated, hunched over the plate, elbows on the table, not a shred of table manners, and she laughed so hard she choked. Then she leaned in and matched him. They cleared 2 plates each and didn't say a word until the food was gone. After that, the seaquarium. Then a carnival along the waterfront, where the neon blurred in the humidity, and the bass from the rides shook the boardwalk underfoot. Then the Ferris wheel. They rose above the skyline. Miami stretched below them, the bay glittering. The cranes lit up along the port, headlights streaking across the causeways. At the top, Frank reached for her hand. Not to hold it, just to get her attention. Do you like me? Ella turned. What about you? Do you like? I've liked you since the first day I saw you, the day I picked you up. No. He was quiet for a second. Before that, her eyebrows pulled together. He told her about the charity gala on Star Island, the terrace, the bird cages, how he watched her open every single one without looking back. He told her he'd been standing in the shadows watching her the whole time. Ella raised an eyebrow. You get around. Charity galas, trash cans, busy schedule. I hosted that gala. She didn't react. My name is Frank Russo, he said, of the Russo family. The Ferris wheel creaked. The wind off the water pushed a strand of hair across her face. She didn't move it. I know, she said. Frank stared. I didn't know you were from the Russo family. That's news, but I guessed you were from a rich family a while ago. She started listing things. The way he handled the clothes at the store, bending his fingertips so the fabric wouldn't wrinkle. The way he left his top collar unbuttoned without thinking, the ease of someone who'd worn custom tailoring his whole life. The first edition hardcovers lining the shelves of his supposedly run-down apartment. The way he tested the water temperature before washing her feet. Precise, automatic, the reflex of someone who'd been served by staff since birth. And at the restaurant, no matter how sloppy he pretended to be, he never once chewed with his mouth open. Frank let out a breath, pushed his glasses back. I thought I did a better job. You did fine, she said. For someone who's clearly never been poor a day in his life. He looked at her. The humor was gone now. I never wanted to lie to you. I was afraid that if you knew who I was, you'd assume the whole thing was a setup, that none of it was real. Ella's face changed. The warmth left it, her jaw set. Her eyes went flat and distant. Well, she said, you put on a great show for me, so I played along. She stood up. The Ferris wheel was descending now. The lights of the carnival washed across her face in slow pulses of red and gold. Frank, let's end this. The timer on Frank's phone went off right at this moment, and she stepped off the ride and walked. He went after her, caught her arm. Ella, just let go of me, please, just listen. The sound of slow clapping came from behind them. Both of them turned. Luke Anderson, leaning against a railing with his arms folded and a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "So this is what you skipped our engagement for," he said. "This guy?" Frank stepped in front of Ella. "Stay away from her." Luke laughed. "And what exactly are you going to do for her, pretty boy? What she needs is a man who can solve her family's problems, not some boy who just wastes her time." He spread his hands. "The marriage is already done. It's just paperwork at this point." Frank reached for his phone. Ella grabbed his wrist and stopped him. Her voice was ice. "Who do you think you are? What right do you have to get involved in my family's business?" She dropped his wrist. "The time I spent with you was me playing pretend, acting out a love story." She swallowed hard. "I'm done acting." Luke stepped forward and reached for Ella. Frank blocked him, chest to chest, eyes locked. "I told you, stay away from her." Luke leaned in close enough that only Frank could hear him. "Back off, or I make her life so much worse than it already is." While Frank was locked on Luke, Ella moved. She stepped around both of them, took Luke's arm, and turned back toward Frank. Her face was composed, controlled. Only her fingers, white-knuckled where they gripped Luke's sleeve, gave anything away. "You can have a better life, Frank. Find someone who can actually heal you." Her voice cracked once, just barely, on the next line. Not someone with this much damage." She turned. Luke's arm slid around her waist. The guard stepped between her and Frank and held him in place. He watched the car pull away. In the back seat, Ella pressed her forehead to the window and thought, "Frank, I don't want to be a burden to you. I'd rather you forget me." Frank stood in the empty carnival lot, alone, the Ferris wheel still turning behind him. In his hand, the little plush puppy with the 3 black buttons. The engagement party was held at a private estate in Coral Gables 2 weeks later. Crystal everywhere, white orchids on every surface. A string quartet playing something no one was listening to. The Lynn and Anderson families filled the room. Champagne flutes, catching the chandelier light, handshakes, practiced smiles. Luke stood at the center of it all in a tailored navy suit. He got down on one knee in front of Ella, opened the ring box, and started his speech. He never finished. The double doors at the back of the room slammed open. Frank walked in. Behind him, his men moving fast, spreading through the room before anyone could react. They had the Anderson security on the floor in seconds. 2 of them pinned Luke face down on the marble before his knee had fully left the ground. The ring box skidded across the tile. The string quartet stopped. Frank walked straight to Ella. Didn't look at anyone else in the room. "I've been thinking about what you said," he said, "for a long time." His chest was moving, but his voice held. "Without you, I would have gone home, played the role of the perfect Frank Russo, maybe achieved great things, maybe even married someone I didn't love," he faltered, "and spent the rest of my life wondering what it was all for." Ella's fingers were curling and uncurling at her sides. "But from the moment I met you, everything changed." He held her eyes. "Even though you feel like you live in darkness, I can see you. The moment I met you, the light came back into my life." He got down on one knee. "Please let me in. Will you marry me?" Ella laughed, short, wet, involuntary. She reached out her hand. "Yes." He slid the ring onto her finger. Across the room, Luke screamed against the marble, thrashing under the men holding him down. Ella looked at the ring and at Frank, then she turned and ran toward the doors. Got a few steps away, spun around and yelled back at him. "What are you waiting for? Run!" Frank grinned. He took a step toward her. Above them, the chandelier, a massive crystal piece anchored to the ceiling by chains that had held it for 40 years, groaned. The bolt shifted. Frank heard it before he saw it. His eyes snapped up. The fixture was directly above Ella. The chain gave way. Without thinking, he sprinted towards her. In 3 strides, he shoved her clear with both hands. The chandelier crashed down on him. Everything went dark. The charity gala on Star Island. Frank Russo stood at the edge of the room, gray threaded through his dark hair in uneven streaks, his left hand wrapped around the head of a black lacquered cane. But the suit was perfect. The posture was upright, and his eyes moved through the crowd with the focus of a man who already knew exactly where she was. Ella was sitting alone at a corner table. Legs crossed, chin tilted slightly downward, fingers resting on the edge of the tablecloth. Her hair was pinned up the way her mother always insisted, and she looked exactly the way she had the first time he'd ever seen her. Beautiful and hollow and completely unaware of him. Frank crossed the room. His stride was measured, the cane planting with each step, his grip adjusting with every shift in weight. He stopped in front of her table, transferred the cane to his left hand, extended his right, and said, "Hi, I'm Frank Russo." Ella looked up. Her gaze swept his face, but attached. She didn't recognize him, not a flicker. But then her eyes dropped to his lapel, and she went still. Clipped to the breast of his jacket was a small, handmade plush puppy, 2 black buttons stitched across its chest. "Where did you get that?" The politeness on her face fell away. She sat forward. I had one exactly." She stopped herself, looked at him again. "How do you have my plush puppy?" Frank unclipped it. His fingers were steady when he held it out to her. "Found it by accident. I'm sorry. I didn't realize it belonged to anyone." She took it, turned it over in her hands, ran her thumb across the 2 remaining buttons. Then she stood up, tucked it against her chest, and walked away without another word. Frank watched her disappear into the crowd, moving through the room full of people without touching any of them. His mouth barely moved. "So you really have forgotten me now?" "What happened after the chandelier?" Frank had shoved her clear, both hands flat against her body, every ounce of force he had, and he'd launched her sideways just as the fixture gave way. He heard her hit the ground, heard the chain snap above him, heard her scream his name once, cutting clean through the sound of everything breaking apart. Then nothing. He opened his eyes in his bedroom at the Russo estate. Morning light through the blinds, sheets tangled around his legs. His heart was slamming, and his shirt was soaked through with sweat, and his hands were gripping the mattress so hard his knuckles had gone white. He sat up. The room was quiet, the air conditioner hummed. Outside, a gardener was running a leaf blower somewhere near the east wing. He reached for his phone on the nightstand, and the screen lit up. The date was wrong. He stared at it, blinked, checked again. The date on the screen was the morning of the charity gala, the one where he'd stood near the bar and watched Ella open bird cages on the terrace. That was months ago, before Ella ever knew his name. He put the phone down. His hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against his thighs and held them there until the trembling slowed, then stood up and walked to the bathroom. The man in the mirror was still him, still recognizable, but older with lines that hadn't been there yesterday, or whatever yesterday was. Gray running through his hair in uneven streaks, thinner skin around the eyes. He leaned forward, gripping the edge of the sink, and studied his own face. 10 years at least. The reset had aged him 10 years, and every one of them was visible. In the graying hair, in the slight hollowing of his cheeks, in the way his hands ached when he gripped the porcelain too hard. The plush puppy was on the floor behind him. He didn't remember carrying it. He turned and picked it up, ran his thumb across the chest 2 buttons. There had been 3 small black buttons stitched in a row. He remembered the feel of all 3 under his fingertip the day Ella pressed it into his hands on a sidewalk in Coconut Grove. Now the 3rd was gone. The thread where it had been was still there, frayed and loose, but the button itself had vanished. His chest seized. He doubled over the sink and coughed, and blood hit the white porcelain, bright red against the clean basin. He gripped the counter and waited for it to pass. When it did, he wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and straightened up. "I have to see her right now." He got dressed. His hands trembled through the buttons. He found a cane in the hallway closet, black lacquer with a silver head, and tested his weight on it. His driver opened the door without questions. They drove to Star Island. Frank sat in the back seat with the cane between his knees and the plush puppy clipped to his lapel, watching the causeways blur past, counting the minutes until he could confirm what his phone had already told him. That time had folded backward, that Ella was alive, and that he was the only person on earth who remembered any of it. He made it through the doors of the gala, made it across the room, made it all the way to her table, introduced himself, held out his hand, and watched her face for any trace of recognition. There was none. She took the plush puppy and walked away, and Frank stood there and let her go. The moment she disappeared into the crowd, his knees buckled. The cane slipped sideways. His driver, who had been watching from the edge of the room, caught him under the arm before he hit the ground. Frank's full weight sagged against the man's shoulder. His breathing was ragged. His hand was pressed to his chest, but his eyes were still fixed on the gap, in the crowd where Ella had been. Ella went home to dinner with her parents. The table was set for 3. Her father was already seated, napkin tucked, water poured. He didn't look up when she walked in. "You embarrassed us tonight," he said, walking away from the Huang family mid-introduction, "sitting by yourself where everyone could see you sulking." "I greeted everyone. There was nothing left to." There's plenty left to discuss. Her mother sat down and folded her hands. The Andersons have shown interest in you. They are very well connected. This could be. Do I get a say? Ella pulled her chair out and sat. In any of this or? Her father smirked. He nodded, slow, exaggerated, and snapped his fingers toward the kitchen. The staff brought out a covered dish and set it in front of Ella. She lifted the lid and completely froze. The color left her cheeks in a slow drain, starting at her temples and pulling downward until her lips were bloodless. She knew what it was before the smell reached her. Her father picked up his fork. Eat, and when you're done, I hope you'll go back to being our good, obedient daughter. Ella buried Coco that night, behind the estate, in the soft ground near the garden wall, where the landscaping lights didn't reach. She had the gardener dig the grave for her, but insisted she'll cover it up herself, and asked him to leave her alone. She set the small wrapped bundle in the hole and pressed the dirt back over it with her palms, and she stayed there, on her knees, her dress soaked through at the hem, her chest heaving in silent, airless sobs. Rain started, light at first, steady. Ella didn't move. The water ran down the back of her neck and soaked through her shoulders, and she stayed exactly where she was, until the rain stopped hitting her. She looked up and saw an umbrella held above her head by a hand she didn't recognize through her tears. Frank was standing behind her. Now, she squatted down beside her and his other hand held out a tissue. If you want, I can. His voice was soft and low. I can get you another dog. I know it's not the same, but if it would help. Ella slapped the tissue out of his hand. It hit the wet grass and gradually dissolved. Who are you? Her voice was raw and sharp. What do you want from me? She stood up, dirt on her knees, rain plastering her hair to her face. I don't need your pity. I don't need anyone's. She grabbed the small spade, turned and ran. Frank stayed in the garden, the umbrella still raised, rain soaking through the left side of his shirt. He watched her disappear through the back door and didn't follow. 3 days later, Frank Russo sat at the Lynn family dining table, across from both of Ella's parents. His cane was hooked over the arm of his chair. His hands were folded on the table. He looked regal in his tailored suit, graying hair framing his serious face, but he was still just as handsome, and Mr. Lynn hadn't stopped smiling since he'd walked in. Frank laid it out. He would make every debt the Lynn family owed disappear, and solve every business problem choking their empire. One condition. I want Ella to be my fiancée. Lynn nearly knocked his water glass over standing up. He came around the table, all warmth, all handshakes, all future father-in-law energy. The Russo family, of course. When should we announce? Should we do a dinner? A party? Tell me what you're thinking. Did anyone think to ask me? Ella's voice came from behind the glass partition. She stepped out, arms folded, her jaw set hard. Her mother moved toward her. Ella, honey, this is for your own good. He's the only heir to the Russo, I heard. Her father's smile flattened. He took a step toward her. Are we really going to do this again? Didn't you learn your lesson the last? What are you going to do about it? Ella's voice went up an octave. You already killed Coco, so what's next? Will you kill me too? Frank's palm hit the table. The glasses rattled. He stood, slower than he would have liked, one hand bracing against the edge, and walked toward Mr. Lynn until they were face to face. She's your daughter. Frank's voice was low and even. You will treat her with respect. Mr. Lynn put his hands up. This is a family matter. We've been too lenient with her, that's all. No. Frank turned away from him, faced Ella directly. The only reason I'm here, he said, is because I genuinely like you, that's it. Mr. Lynn immediately pivoted, playing matchmaker now, waving his hands, telling them to go talk in private. Take their time, no pressure. Then he gestured to Mrs. Lynn, and they both left the dining room. Frank's eyes stayed on Ella. Your opinion is the only one that matters to me. If you say no, that's fine. I'll still help your family. No conditions. But I'm asking you for one thing. His hand tightened on the cane. Give me one chance. Let me pursue you. Ella stared at him, shoulders still tight. She looked exhausted. You don't need to say anything more. Frank's shoulders dropped. He nodded and started to apologize. I'll give you that chance. He stopped. Not because I want to be your fiancé, she said. She turned to face him fully. Because I need to get out of this house. Frank accepted. His hand came up, slow, careful, and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. She didn't pull away. The next afternoon, a black car pulled up to the Russo estate, and Ella stepped out with a single suitcase. The butler came down the steps to meet her, but Ella wasn't looking at him. She was staring at the small dog sitting on the front walkway. White coat, dark eyes, ears too big for its head, her hands curled into fists at her sides, her lips pressed together. She didn't reach for it. Frank came out of the house and stood on the balcony a few steps above her. He saw where she was looking. "She's yours," he said. "If you want her. I got her for you." Ella crouched down, picked the dog up with both hands, held it against her chest and pressed her face into its fur. Her voice came out broken and muffled. "Coco, is that? Are you back?" Frank watched her hold the dog, waited until her breathing steadied, then said quietly, "Come inside." He walked her through the house, every room, every hallway. Then he stopped in the main living area and turned to her. "This is your home. You can go wherever you want, do whatever you want, and you never have to answer to anybody. You don't need to report to me, or perform for anyone. You just be yourself." He showed her to the bedroom and told her the whole house was hers. She could sleep anywhere, decorate however she wanted. He took her to another wing, telling her that if she wanted to study, that was also possible. Whatever she wanted to do, he would support her. The butler brought out a tray with 2 sets of car keys and 2 black cards. Ella shook her head. "We're not close enough for me to take that. You just got away from your family," Frank said. "And I want to take full responsibility for you. Let me take care of things. No strings attached. No need to repay me." She put Coco down. The dog circled her ankles and she looked at Frank, searched his face, and asked the question she'd been carrying since the moment he showed up at her parents' table. "Frank, we barely know each other. Why is all of this?" She dragged in a deep breath. "Or are you planning to do what my parents did? Invest in me and sell me off later? Because if that's what this is..." "Come with me," he said. "There's something I want to show you." He took her to the back of the property, past the pool, past the guest house, to a tree planted on a small rise overlooking the bay. The bark was scarred and the branches grew crooked. "My brother Ryan and I planted this when I was 14, Frank said. He was looking at the tree, not at her. His hand rested on the cane. He told her everything. Ryan, the brother the family worshipped, the one his father groomed, the one who did in 20 minutes what took Frank entire nights. Frank had accepted being the lesser son. Then 3 years ago, Ryan was killed in a car accident that was meant for Frank. Ryan saw it coming and shoved Frank clear, took the impact himself. After the funeral, Frank said, "My father looked at me and said, 'Why are you the one standing here?'" His voice was flat, controlled, but the tendons in his neck were pulled tight and his grip on the cane had gone white. "No matter what I do, how much I build, he'd look at me and see the wrong son," he exhaled, and somewhere along the way I started thinking maybe he was right. Ella spoke softly, turning slightly toward him. "Ryan's death is not your fault. It was never your fault. And if your father can't love you for who you actually are," she looked at him directly, "that's his loss." Frank turned to her. He told her that for a long time after his brother died, he had no real reason to keep going, until he met her. "We're the same," he said. "You seem to have everything on the surface, yet you keep everyone at arm's length, and never let anyone close." He stepped toward her. "With me, you don't have to be anything. You can cry, make a scene, say nothing at all. As long as you're here, that's enough." Ella was quiet. The wind off the bay moved through the crooked tree above them. "I don't know how to love someone," she said. Her voice had dropped to almost nothing. I don't think anyone ever showed me how." He drops his cane and pulls her into him. "No one is born knowing how to love." She let him hold her. 5 seconds, maybe 6, then pressed her hands against his chest and stepped back. "Thank you for everything, but I need time." Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. "I need to know this is real, that everything you're doing isn't just another version of someone trying to own me." Frank touched the side of her face. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." "Nay." The next morning, Ella sat at the dining table watching Frank move around the kitchen. She studied him, the gray running through his hair, the careful way he placed things on the counter, the slight hitch in his step when he moved without the cane. She'd never actually looked at him properly before. Without her permission, the thought entered her mind. He's actually quite handsome. Just that he has a lot of gray hair. He set a plate in front of her, sliced bread, nothing else he couldn't cook. "1 slice is fine," she said. "No." He slid the plate closer. "Your body needs carbs." He started lining up jars across the table, strawberry, apricot, grape, blueberry, mayonnaise. "Pick whatever you want." She stared at the row. "I don't actually know what I prefer." He took a clean knife, spread a thin stripe of each flavor across a single slice, and placed it in front of her. Taste them, figure it out. She worked her way across the slice. When she hit the blueberry, her eyes went wide. She went back for a second bite before she'd finished the first. Blueberry, Frank said. She nodded, mouth full, already reaching for the jar. Later, Ella paused outside his study door. Didn't knock, just stood there. You can come in, Frank said without looking up. This is your house too. She stepped inside, looked over his shoulder at the screen. He was wrestling with an architectural illustration for a development project. The proportions were off. The perspective was wrong. The original illustrator had quit, and Frank was trying to force his way through it. That roofline is wrong, Ella said. I know. Can I try? He stood and gestured to her to sit. She sat down, picked up the stylus, and redrew the entire building, clean and precise with perfect proportions. When she finished, Frank took a photo on his phone and sent it to his team. 15 seconds later, a voice note came back. Someone on the other end losing their mind about how good it was, demanding to know who drew it, saying they needed to hire this person immediately. Frank played the voice note out loud. Didn't say a word, just let it fill the room. Ella was glowing. I can help you with these whenever. How about you go back to school? She blinked. Aren't we? She half-lawed. Am I not marrying you? Frank leaned forward. His hand came to the back of her neck, light, warm. What do you actually want to do? Not what anyone told you. What does your heart tell you to do? I want to finish my degree. Then we'll wait for the next enrollment and you apply. I'll handle the rest. She put her arms around his neck. Her voice was muffled against his shoulder. Thank you for believing in me. That night, she found him in the study again. She was holding the plush puppy. You've been so good to me, she said, so I want to give you something. One of my most important things. She held the bear out. He stared at it, his jaw tightening. Don't look down on it, she said. It can record sound, see? She twisted the button to demonstrate, and then looked up at him, waiting. He took the bear and ran his fingers over the buttons. When he raised his eyes to hers, they were glassy. I like you, Ella, she smiled. Then her voice went quiet. Frank, what does kissing feel like? She leaned down so her face was level with him where he was sitting, and gave him an almost feather-light kiss. As she pulled back, his hand came and he kissed her back, deep, slow, his hand cradling the side of her face. Ella's composure fell apart. She pulled away, flustered, said goodnight too fast and walked out, practically ran. Frank looked down at the plush puppy and smiled. The weeks after that were the closest thing to a normal life either of them had ever had. They went to the beach. They wore matching clothes one morning and couldn't stop laughing about it. He kissed her in the kitchen, and she called him shameless. He grinned and said yes, he was, and pulled her in tighter. She kissed him back, then pushed him off and told him to pour her a glass of juice because she was thirsty. He laughed, walking to the counter. He grabbed a glass, and as he reached for the jug, his vision went white, his knees gave. The glass exploded on the tile, and his body followed it down. Ella ran. She stepped straight through the broken glass, didn't register it, didn't flinch, and dropped to her knees beside him. Her hands were on his face. His name was the only word coming out of her mouth. When his eyes fluttered open, the first thing he looked at was her feet. The glass. Ella, your feet, what happened? Are you okay? Frank, look at me. He tried to sit up, couldn't. She got her arms under him, lifted, and he went down again. She screamed for the butler. The hospital. Fluorescent lights. The low electronic hum of monitors. The doctor stood at the foot of the bed and told them that every previous checkup had come back clean. But what the scans were showing now was a mass in Frank's lungs, aggressive, fast-growing. He told Ella she should prepare herself. When the doctor left, Ella sat in the chair beside Frank's bed and bent forward at the waist. Her body shook. She was trying to hold the sound in and failing. Frank opened his eyes, pulled the oxygen mask off. Hey, why are you crying? Because I thought you were going to. She couldn't get the rest out. I'm not going anywhere, I told you. I'll always be here. He saw a cut on her finger, from the glass. He reached across to the side table, found a Band-Aid, and wrapped it carefully while she sat there trying to breathe. She picked up the hospital tray and tried to feed him. The food was too hard. She could see the pain in his face when he chewed, the way his eyes tightened and his breath caught. He waved her off and told her he was fine, told her he was messing with her. She didn't buy it. She crushed the food into the soup and spooned it back to him while, under the blanket, His fist gripped the bedsheet until his knuckles went white. Later, alone in the doctor's office, Frank sat across the desk and heard the full picture. The tumor had spread faster than anything the doctor had seen. He asked Frank if he'd taken any unusual medication, if anything abnormal had happened to his body recently. No, Frank said. He knew this was the price. The time reset cost him years and his health. His body was paying the debt. He took the report, folded it, put it in the trash, and told the doctor, under no circumstances was Ella to know any of this. He walked out of the doctor's office. Ella was in the hallway. She hadn't heard the details, but she suspected something was off about him. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number asking her to meet for a conversation. She went. The man waiting at the cafe was Luke Anderson. She'd never seen him before. He sat across from her in a pressed suit and introduced himself as the man that would have been her fiancé if Frank hadn't intervened. Ella stood up to leave. What if I told you I know why Frank is sick? She stopped, sitting back down. Get to the point. Luke leaned forward. He's dying because of you, Ella. You and Frank aren't meant to be together. And if you leave him, if you come to me, he will get better. Immediately. What a load of is it? You've seen how fast it's spreading. You've seen him collapse. Luke straightened his cuffs. The closer you two get, the worse his illness becomes. Haven't you noticed that? Ella stared at him, then stood. I don't know who you are, and I don't believe you. She walked out, but her hands were shaking when she reached the car. Luke picked up his phone behind her. Go ahead with it. I'll transfer the rest when it's done. Make sure you leave no trail. Ella came home and found Frank in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, stirring something on the stove. He told her dinner was almost ready. She asked when he'd been discharged. It's nothing, he said. Minor procedure. They'll handle the rest with medication. Frank, are you hiding something from me? He turned around, leaned against the counter. How could I possibly hide anything from you? She looked at him. He held eye contact, but his grip on the counter edge, too tight. Knuckles pale, told her everything his mouth wouldn't. I'm going to see Maya, she said, and left. At the bar, Ella ordered something strong. Maya sat across from her and waited. Frank and I are getting married, Ella said. Maya's face lit up, then immediately fell. Okay, so why do you look like someone died? Ella turned the glass in her hands. What if you found out that being with someone was actually hurting them? That they'd be better off if you just… Maya studied her face. Then under the table, she pulled out her phone and texted Frank. Blackbird bar, come now. Frank was sitting on the stairs at home with the plush puppy in his hands when the message came through. He grabbed his keys. Back at the bar, Ella told Maya about Luke, about what he'd said, about the timing and what the doctor said about the possibility of a tumor, and the doubt she couldn't shake. Should I leave him, Maya? Is he better off without? Maya set her glass down. Did he lie to you? Yes. But the only reason that man would hide his own diagnosis is because he'd rather be in pain alone than watch you worry. She leaned forward. You love him, I can see it, so stop looking for reasons to run and just stay. Ella finished her drink and stood up to go find Frank. As she turned around, Frank was standing right there. She walked into his chest, her forehead pressed against him. Her fingers gripped the front of his shirt. I don't want to be away from you, she said. I can't. I tried to think of a reason and I can't. His arms closed around her. Maya looked away. Frank held Ella and looked over her head at Maya. Thank you, he said, for always being there for her. Maya waved them off. Go both of you, before I ruin my makeup. Frank wrapped his jacket around Ella's shoulders and walked her out. They ended up on the beach. The water was black and the moon hung low over the bay. The breeze was pulling at Ella's hair and she blinked a few times. The salt air cutting through the alcohol. Frank was about to ask what would have happened if he hadn't come, but Ella was already moving. She ran ahead, stopped, turned around on the sand. Come here. He walked toward her. Frank, I want you to kiss me. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His thumb lingered at her temple. You're still exactly the same as before, he said. She frowned. Huh, what do you mean? He didn't explain. She poked his chest. You promised you'd do everything I asked. I said I want a kiss. She kissed him. He kissed her back. They stayed there until the tide crept up around their ankles, and neither of them cared. Back at the house, she went to take a bath. He waited outside the bathroom, pacing, passed her nightclothes through the curtain without looking. When she came out, he carried her to the bed. Are you still drunk? She shook her head, completely clear. Her hand drifted to the buttons on his shirt. He caught her wrist. "I want this," she said, "with you. I want my first time to be with someone I actually love." He let go. The next morning, she opened her eyes first, watched the light move across the ceiling. She wasn't asking herself why. She was glad it was him. When Frank stirred and asked if she was awake, she squeezed her eyes shut. "I know you're up," he said. "Fine. Get dressed. I'm taking you somewhere." He drove her to a private spot overlooking the Atlantic. Candles, flowers, a table for two on a terrace with the ocean stretching out behind it. He covered her eyes and walked her to the table by the railing and made her sit. When he took his hands away, there was a cake. She turned to him, confused. "You forgot your own birthday," he said. She went quiet. "I haven't celebrated my birthday in a long time." He didn't push. He patted her head and asked her to make a wish. She closed her eyes and wished he'd live 100 years. Her lips moved without sound. When she opened her eyes, he asked what she'd wished for. "If I tell you, it won't come true." He handed her a file. She opened it. Inside, a legal document, an equity transfer agreement. Every share Frank held in the Russo family holdings, signed over to her name. She stared at it. What is this?" "I promised you freedom. This document will give you the kind of freedom that lasts. No matter what happens, you never have to depend on anyone again." She pressed the document to her chest. The tears hit fast. She buried her face in his shoulder and held on. "What happened to the tough girl I used to know?" he said, holding her gently. "She was never real," she said into his collar, sniffing. "This is the real me. Stop crying, I have one more thing." She pulled back. He got down on one knee. "I've thought about this since the day I met you. Will you marry me?" She reached out her hand, smiling through wet eyes. "Yes." He held the ring up, but before he could slip it onto her finger, his vision went black. His hand trembled, sending the band clattering against the stone floor. He reached blindly for the railing, missed, and went down. They were back in the hospital, to the familiar, sterile hum of fluorescent lights and the rhythmic beep of monitors. This time, however, the doctor pulled Ella out into the quiet of the hallway. The truth was stark. The tumor was malignant, spreading steadily to every major organ. There would be no surgeries and no treatments left to try. They were looking at 3 months, maybe less. Ella walked out of the office, stood in the corridor, pressed her back to the wall, stared at the ceiling until her breathing leveled out. Then she took out her phone and called Luke Anderson. "Let's do it." Ella went to see Frank one last time. He was asleep. The afternoon light came through the blinds in thin strips across his face. She stood at the window, cried without making a sound, then walked to his bedside, kissed his forehead. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I can't say yes." She pulled the ring off her finger, set it on the side table. "If you really want to give me freedom, then understand this. People close to me get hurt. That's all I'm good at." She kissed his forehead one more time, held her mouth there until her body started shaking. Then she stood up and walked out without looking back. Frank woke up the next morning to an empty bed. The ring was on the table, catching the light. He stared at it, then went to see the doctor. The doctor ran new scans, ran them twice, sat down across from Frank and said, the tumor cells were vanishing, not shrinking, disappearing. His body was healing itself at a rate that shouldn't have been possible. Frank walked out of the office, still processing, not realizing that Ella was standing on the other side of the hallway. She'd heard everything through the door. She took a step toward him, but Luke's hand closed around her arm from behind. "I told you," Luke said. "You two aren't meant to be together." Ella looked at the floor. Her voice was barely audible. "I know." She turned and walked away. Seconds later, Luke dialed the doctor and congratulated him on a convincing performance, telling him the rest of the money would be wired by morning. The doctor was quiet. Then he said, "The report wasn't fake." Luke stopped walking. "He's genuinely recovering. I can't explain it, but the tumor is gone." Luke hung up, adjusted his cuffs, and murmured, "Doesn't matter. She believes me. That's enough." The following week, at the annual Miami Philanthropic Gala, the biggest charity event of the season, Luke planned to introduce Ella publicly as his fiancée. She arrived on his arm in a black dress, posture rigid, face composed. They walked in and she saw the stage and the man on it. Frank was on the stage, mid-address, his voice carrying clear and steady across the room. His cane was propped against the lectern. The gray in his hair caught the overhead lights. And when his eyes swept the crowd and landed on Ella, his speech didn't falter, but his hand, resting on the edge of the podium, tightened until the tendons showed through his skin. Luke's hand tightened around her waist. "Tonight," he said close to her ear, "everyone here will know you're mine." Frank finished his speech, picked up a glass of wine, and walked directly toward them. Luke pulled Ella closer. "Frank, I don't think you've met my fiancée." "We've met," Frank said. He looked at Ella. She greeted him formally, controlled. Frank said in a very tight voice, "Congratulations, you have a wonderful fiancé." Ella excused herself, saying she wasn't feeling well. Luke's face tightened. As she left, Luke brought up their engagement party. Told Frank he is invited. Frank set his glass on the nearest table, grabbed Luke by the tie, pulled him close. "Did you threaten her?" Luke removed Frank's hand, smoothed his tie. "I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm going to find her right now. And if I find out you said even one bad word to her, I won't let it go." "Do what you need to do," Luke said, shrugging. Frank went after Ella. Luke watched him leave, downing his drink, then reached across the table and picked up a steak knife. Outside, Ella was sitting alone on the stone steps, overlooking the water. Frank came around the corner and stopped. His hand started toward her shoulder. He pulled it back. "Ella." She turned. Her eyes were raw. "It's not appropriate for you to look for me anymore," she said. "I have a fiancé." He sat down beside her. She held up her hand and showed him Luke's ring. He took her hand. "You almost said yes to me. You almost wore my ring. Then you disappeared without a word." His voice was low. "Was it your parents? Was it Luke?" She pulled her hand back. "You've got it wrong. I was playing with you the whole time." She forced a laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "You actually wanted to sign over your family's shares. For me. That's... Honestly, Frank, that's embarrassing." He reached into his pocket, pulled out the small cocoa plush she'd given him weeks ago. She looked at it and her mask nearly cracked. She recovered. "You don't mean anything to me," she said. "You never did. I was with you only because I was bored. That's it. The person I've always wanted is Luke." Frank went still. He'd heard this speech before, in another life. At a carnival on a different night, when she left with Luck in the back of his car. Same lie dressed up in cruelty so he'd believe it. "Ella." His voice was calm. "You said this to me once before." He leaned toward her. "And I believed it that time. I won't make that mistake again." She stared at him, her lips parted. "There might be 1,000 reasons we shouldn't be together," he said. "But if there's one reason we should, and I will always choose that one." He extended his hand, palm up open. "What's the real answer? What does your heart actually want?" Her eyes went from his hand to his face, then to the ring on her finger. She pulled Luke's ring off, placed it in Frank's palm. He closed his fist around it, turned, and threw it into the bay. She almost laughed. He stood up, pulling her up with him, and kissed her. Behind them came the sounds of footsteps, fast, the scrape of shoes on stone. Frank saw Luke coming over Ella's shoulder, saw the glint of the blade. He spun around with her in his arms and turned his back to the knife. The impact hit between his shoulder blades. Guards tackled Luke to the ground. Luke was screaming, "This is what happens. This is what you get when you betray me." But he was looking at Ella when he said it, and Ella was looking at Frank, who was on his knees, one hand braced on the stone, the other reaching behind him where the blade had struck him. He fell forward, she caught him. His weight took them both down. "Frank, no, stay with me, keep your eyes." His hand found hers, squeezed once. His eyes moved across her face, then they closed. In his jacket pocket, the second button on the plush puppy dissolved. Time folded, the world reset. And when Frank Russo opened his eyes, the body looking back at him in the mirror was at least 70 years old. His hair was white. His hands trembled constantly. He couldn't stand without the cane. His lungs rattled when he breathed, and the cough came every few minutes, wet, deep, tasting of iron. He pressed his palms against the bathroom counter and waited for the dizziness to pass. One button left on the bear, one life left. He called Henry his consigliere. Henry arrived within the hour, found Frank in the study, sitting in a leather chair, struggling to keep his voice above a whisper. "I need you to draft a contract," Frank said. He had to pause between sentences. "And I need you to deliver it tonight, to the Lynn family, at the Star Island Gala. Terms?" Frank closed his eyes, leaned his head back against the chair. "Got it. Here's the dialogue rewritten in that style. First, Ella Lynn is to continue her education. No one can interfere or stop her. She is to be allowed to finish her degree on her own terms." He coughed, wiped his mouth. "Second, she is not to be made to participate in any blind dates or arranged introductions. Her marriage is entirely her own choice. and if she chooses never to marry, no one may question it. Third, she is not to be forced to attend any business event she has no interest in. No more galas, no more parties unless she decides to go. He paused. And this one is non-negotiable. Luke Anderson must not be allowed anywhere near her life. He does not contact her. He does not come near her. If he tries, the entire deal is void. Henry typed, then looked up. Is there anything else? Yes. Her parents are going to learn how to be good parents. I will personally hire someone to teach them. After signing this agreement, whether it is sincere or just for appearances, they must treat her well and give her the warm family life she deserves. They must give her the freedom to simply be their daughter. He exhaled. Write it all down. And if I think of anything else, we add it later. Henry stopped typing, looked up. Sir, if you don't mind me asking, why are you doing all of this? For someone you've never. Because Ella Lynn is the one person I love above all else. Henry held his gaze for a long moment, then back at the screen and kept typing. By the time the contract reached the Lynn family, it was over 20 articles long. Article 20. Ella was never to be forced to diet, full autonomy over how she dressed. Her parents read through it at the gala with Henry standing over them. They asked why Frank Russo was making these demands. Henry handed them a pen. The terms are non-negotiable, and this arrangement must stay confidential. Ella must never find out. They signed. They didn't even hesitate. That evening, Ella was called down for dinner. She expected the usual. Instead, the table was covered with food she actually loved. Her mother smiled at her and told her to sit, to eat, to take as much as she wanted. Ella sat at the dining table, confused. What happened to you two? Her father bowed his head. We've been doing this parenting thing wrong, and we want to try again. Her mother reached across the table and handed her an envelope. Inside, a fresh acceptance letter. The art school she'd always dreamed of. Ella was so happy she picked up Coco and ran outside laughing. Across the street, Frank watched from a parked car, leaning on his cane, collar pulled up. He saw her spinning in the garden with the dog in her arms and his breath caught. She looked so beautiful when she was happy. This time, he told himself, I'll be her shadow so she can shine as bright as she deserves to. As long as she's alive and she's happy, that's all I need. Before Ella left to study abroad, her mother told her they'd hired a gardener to look after Coco while she was gone, since Coco is too young to go with her. Ella went out to meet him. The gardener was an old man with white hair and a cane hooked over his arm. He moved slowly, carefully. He was kneeling beside the flower bed when she approached, and he straightened up with effort when she said hello. She crouched down, kissed Coco on the head, and handed the leash over. Please take good care of him for me. I will. Have you ever had a dog? The old man looked at Coco, then back at her. I did a long time ago. I raised it with someone I cared about very much. The dog looked a lot like this one. Were you happy, back then? Yes. He smiled, the lines around his eyes deepened. Even when we did nothing. Even when we just sat together and looked at each other. I was always happy. Ella's face softened. That sounds really lucky. I've never had that. The old man shifted his weight on the cane. Life is long, and your road still has a lot of ground left. You're going to be fine, Ella. And one day, you'll meet someone who's been waiting for you. She laughed. I'll finish school first. Fair enough. I spoke too soon. She asked for his name. Frank Russo. She nodded. Got it. Thank you, Mr. Russo. She turned to leave. He called after her. Ella Lynn. She looked back. I hope you realize your dreams sooner than you think. She smiled, wished him happiness, and walked away. He watched her until she turned the corner, then said, to no one, she's happy now. Years passed. Frank's health was failing. The coughs came more often. The blood came darker. He spent his days in a small room on the property, the gardener's quarters, with Coco curled up, on the bed beside him, and the plush puppy on the nightstand. On a night when the pain was worse than usual, and the ceiling wouldn't stop spinning, Frank picked up the plush puppy and pressed the record button. The tiny red light blinked on. Dear stranger, he said. His voice was barely above a whisper. If one day I'm gone and you find this, I want you to hear our story. He started talking. Ella finished her degree abroad and came home with honors. Her parents met her at the door. She told them she wanted to hold a private art exhibition. They agreed without hesitation. Then she asked about Coco. Her mother's face changed. Coco is fine, she said. But the gardener, the one looking after him, he passed a few days ago. Ella went straight to Frank's room, found Coco first, fully grown now, lying on a folded blanket near the bed. The room was small, clean, a single chair by the window, a letter on the table. She picked it up. As you asked, Miss Lin, I have taken good care of the puppy. You can take him home now. May you have a peaceful life. I'll go before you. Her hands trembled, and she felt an overwhelming wave of sadness she couldn't explain sweep over her. As she set the letter down, her hand knocked a chest off the table, and the plush puppy fell out. She picked it up. It was old and worn now, but looked taken care of. She turned it over, found the last button, pressed it. His voice filled the room. He told her about the first time he saw her, sitting alone at a gala, opening birdcages, while the whole party went on without her. He told her about the 11 days in dirty clothes, and the 3 days on the timer, and the Ferris wheel, and the vinyl cafe, and the fireflies, and jar. He told her about the chandelier, and waking up 10 years older than he used to be. He told her about the second lifetime, the blueberry jam, the piano, the birthday no one had ever remembered, the ring that fell from his fingers. He told her about the knife, and waking up in an old man's body, and the contract he dictated from a chair he could barely sit up in. 26 articles and a gardener job and a promise to take care of one small dog. Ella sat on the floor of that room, with the plush puppy pressed against her chest, and cried, until there was nothing left and her eyes were bruised. Red. After that she went back. Every place they'd ever been, the alley in Coconut Grove, the marina, the vinyl cafe in Wynwood, the arcade on the beach, the Cuban restaurant in Little Havana, the Ferris wheel, Key Biscayne, Star Island. She walked the same streets, sat in the same seats, held the bear and let his voice play. Now imagine this, dear listener, that by some magical stroke of luck, they are both once again given another chance to love each other again. Imagining that we see them both, young and vibrant, with nothing in between their love, just the two of them standing face to face. They stand at the beach, maybe, and she looks at him and says, "Hi, how about we introduce ourselves again?" He smiles. "Okay, my name is." They both laugh. And that is how our story ends. Now, 2 questions and a favor. What did you think of this story? How amazing would it be for you to find a love that is willing to protect you at all costs without ever asking for anything back? And who was your favorite character in this story? Mine was Maya, though she didn't have a lot of scenes. What about yours? Also rate this story from 1 to 10. I read every single one of your comments, I promise. Thank you so much for watching. Do me a quick favor and like this story, as that encourages me a lot and costs you nothing. Also be sure to like and subscribe, and I will bring you more stories like this one next time. Talk to you soon, loves.